Good morning. Labor will today unveil one of its major campaign policies, promising to lift the controversial freeze on Medicare rebates to doctors. The move will cost $12 billion over 10 years.
It was first introduced by Labor when it was in power in 2013 and enraged GPs who said they were being starved of funds they needed to provide quality care. In last month's budget, the coalition said it would keep the freeze until 2020.
Now, we'll be speaking to Resources Minister Josh Frydenberg in just a moment. But first, let's hear from Labor's health spokeswoman Catherine King explaining the Medicare policy to AM this morning.
Primary care is the heart of Medicare. Today we are making a very strong, unequivocal statement that we want to back our general practitioners. We want to back our nurses who are working in general practice because they are the heart of our system. We want people to go to general practice. We want them to stay out of our hospital system as long as they can.
Catherine King speaking this morning. Federal Resources Minister Josh Frydenberg joins us now from Parliament House. Josh Frydenberg, good morning. Thanks for making time.
Nice to be with you, Virginia.
Mr Frydenberg, Minister, we will get to the health matter in just a moment, but the Immigration Department and Border Force have confirmed that they're working with police to investigate allegations of serious criminality by their officers. What do you know about this, and does it undermine the Prime Minister's election campaigning, which has seen him visit multiple Border Force facilities right in front of those vessels in a very political way?
Well, Virginia, I understand from the release put out by the department that these are not new allegations. They are obviously working on them, and such behaviour will not be tolerated, and we'll take every possible measure to ensure that those people, if they have behaved in a way that is criminal, face the appropriate justice system.
So is this the last time we'll probably see the Prime Minister posing in front of such vessels?
Oh, look, I think that's a pretty unfair comment on the many reputable, hard-working and highly capable people in the department, people working to protect our borders, and they've done an incredibly important job for the country. And as you know, we are now reaping the dividends, both the humanitarian dividend as well as the economic dividend of having a strong border protection policy, because we've closed 17 detention centres while we've been in government, whereas the Labor Party opened 17.
Minister, it's not a slur on the staff of Border Force. It's actually a question, as many others have questioned at the time and on the day, as to whether the Prime Minister should politicise that particular part of our defence response.
We don't politicise that particular part of our border protection policy at all. I think what we're doing is responding to the challenges that we're faced on our border and the reckless policy of our political opponents when they were in government. And now we've restored some order and integrity to the border protection system, and we can thank the people at Border Force for the work that they've done in achieving that.
In the meantime, though, and just a last question on this topic before we move on, there are allegations of serious criminality by their own officers. So how do Australians have faith in that Border Force this morning with stories like that being released?
Well, just look at the record. Look at the record of Border Force and look at the record of this government. As I said...
I've just got to jump in there. No one's questioning that, but it's about the serious criminality going on at the same time as Border Force doing its job. That's the query this morning.
No, it doesn't matter if there's been allegations of criminality in the health system or in the social welfare system or in the immigration system. They're all being dealt with through appropriate measures. We have people there who are extremely capable, law-abiding workers, and the system is prepared to deal with any such eventuality as the one that you raised this morning.
All right. Minister, so how is the government going to respond to Labor's pledge to lift the freeze on the Medicare benefit schedule?
Well, let's not forget that it was the Labor Party who first froze these Medicare payments back in 2013, and both bulk billing rates and Medicare funding have increased substantially under the coalition government. In fact, Medicare funding averaged during the 6 years that Labor were in office at $17 billion. It's now $23 billion, and it goes to $26 billion a year by 2021. And importantly, bulk billing rates average under the Labor Party 79%, and they've gone up to 85%. So what we have shown is that the bulk billing rates and the Medicare funding have increased substantially under the coalition. And at the same time, Virginia, we've invested in other areas of health, for example, doubling the amount that goes to the states and territories for public dental provision. We've more than doubled the number of PBS drugs that we have listed compared to the Labor's time in office, and of course the $2.9 billion that we announced in the budget for public hospitals. So it's a very strong record in health, and we've got a number of budget priorities, and you'll hear from Labor plenty of spending promises, but you'll also see a very big $66 billion black hole.
Well, it's one that's clearly pleased the Australian Medical Association, and they're saying it's directly going to benefit those people who can least afford to pay their bills when they go and see the doctor. $925 million out of the pockets of everyday Australians, keeping the freeze in place under the budget measures that were released just a little while ago.
But what data has showed is that the bulk billing rates have continued to rise, and at 85% they compare to the 79% under the Labor Party, and increased funding is going into Medicare year on year. But we've got a number of health priorities.
So just to jump in there, because our time is tight, you're not considering a reconsideration of that freeze, given what Labor's announced today, staying in the same position? Our
policy, as stated by Susan Lee, stands.
OK. Now, look, the Labor's move to reserve Australian gas, if we can use that phrase, requiring LNG exporters to set aside some supply for the domestic market to help manufacturers and to keep prices down for consumers. Can you actually mount an argument against that?
Well, it's not me who's been mounting an argument against that, Virginia. It's the Labor Party's own side. In fact, the policy has been described as, quote, an investment killer and cruelling the economic credibility of the Labor Party. They're not my words. They're the words of the former Labor Energy Minister, Martin Ferguson.
They are indeed, but he's no longer a Member of Parliament, and you're the Resources Minister. Do you make an argument against doing that, against reserving some precious LNG for the Australian market?
I absolutely do, and Gary Gray is still a member of the Parliament and was the last Labor Energy Minister. He described such a reservation policy as damaging and doing nothing to decrease prices. So there you have it. But I'm relying on the words and the advice of the ACCC, who just released a major report less than 1 month ago that ironically was welcomed by the Labor Party at the time, which explicitly ruled out a reservation, because what a reservation does is it decreases the incentive for companies to explore. Now, what we need to do is we need to reduce red tape as we have, we need to invest in geoscience as we're doing, and we need to implement a number of the recommendations that the ACCC have put forth in their report in order to increase the amount of gas and increase the amount of gas supplies. But don't get me wrong here, Australia has been an incredible beneficiary of the rise in demand globally for gas. It's created tens of thousands of jobs in Australia, tens of billion dollars worth of export income, and the Labor Party is just responding to the calls from the union movement for this disastrous reservation policy.
But just finally on this, on your policy, you can guarantee to our viewers this morning that prices aren't going to rise as a result of that LNG being sold offshore.
Well, what I can guarantee to you is that there is plenty of supply domestically, and the ACCC has made that very clear, that it is a priority for us to get gas.
And it won't affect pricing here?
Well, we're determined to get gas prices down, but, you know, think of the tens of thousands of people who have benefited. Think of the tens of billions of dollars that has come in terms of export income and government revenue from our gas supply overseas. And we are great beneficiaries from our policy position and from our abundance of gas.
Just finally this morning, I'm just wondering your view on this one, Josh Frydenberg, who's right, Peter Dutton, when he says that illiterate and Inuit refugees are taking Australian jobs, or these people. One in particular is Ewan Jones, the MP for Herbert, the government whip. Let's bring up his comments here. We make sweeping generalisations about people. If we can bring up those comments, this is according to quotes or an interview he gave to BuzzFeed. But if you're going to try and tell me that men from an Arab or Islamic background come to this country and sit on their arse and do nothing, well, you're kidding yourself, he said. Or is the Department of Immigration right back in 2011 when they found, according to a report from Professor Graham Hugo, the research found the overwhelming picture of humanitarian program entrants and their children is one of considerable achievement and contribution. Humanitarian entrants help meet labour shortages, including in low-skill and low-paid occupations, and they display strong entrepreneurial qualities. Who's right in your view, Josh Frydenberg?
Well, I don't think those views are at odds, because what Peter Dutton...
I think most ordinary Australians this morning looking at those views would believe they are completely at odds.
Well, Virginia, I tell you what...
No one there has suggested in any way that Australians' jobs were being taken, whereas that's exactly what your Immigration Minister argued.
No. What Peter Dutton and Ewan Jones and I and all the members of the Coalition agree is that the refugee intake has been part of the great Australian success story. It's built us up as a prosperous, tolerant and cohesive nation. And we've taken over 850,000 refugees since World War II, and the Coalition continues to increase our humanitarian intake from over 13,000 today to 18,000 in a few years' time. So it's a great story. Now, what Peter Dutton was referring to is some of the real challenges that we face with settlement, because so many people are coming, and it's through no fault of their own. They're coming from the Horn of Africa or for other trouble spots around the world where they may have not gone to school, and they certainly, can't speak English in large numbers. In fact, 44% of all females who come to Australia through the refugee intake and 33% of males don't understand spoken English. Now, that's a challenge for us in terms of resettlement, but it's a challenge that we can overcome, and we're determined to overcome by spending more than $800 million a year on these resettlement services.
On this issue, in this election campaign, Josh Frydenberg, has the government decided rather than use a dog whistle to use a foghorn?
Look, I'm not going to respond to that, Virginia. I think, we have talked
Even,
about...
even from someone who has refugees as part of their forebears, as I do too?
Yeah, and I'm so proud of Australia's record in taking hundreds of thousands of refugees. And I also understand the need for strong border protection. At the same time, we always have to make clear that we welcome people from other parts of the world, especially the ones who are seeking a better life here in Australia. They enrich us all, and long may that refugee and humanitarian intake continue.
Josh Frydenberg, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you.
Nice to be with you, Virginia.
Let's go to other news.